It's May 21st, 2026, 21 days from the opening ceremony at the Azteca. And this morning, the 2026 World Cup is dealing with something that genuinely no one in football governance had on their bingo card when this tournament was awarded 8 years ago. A Bundibugyo Ebola outbreak. Not in a distant region that the football world can file away as background noise. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, a country that qualified for the World Cup for the first time since 1974, that is scheduled to play its opening match against Portugal in Houston, Texas on June 17th, that has already canceled the Kinshasa leg of its pre-tournament preparation camp, and whose fans are now formally barred from entering the United States under a CDC travel restriction order that came into force this week. The U.S. Embassy in the Democratic Republic of the Congo has temporarily paused all immigrant and non-immigrant visa services. The WHO has declared the outbreak a public health emergency of international concern. As of yesterday, 600 suspected cases have been reported, and 139 people are suspected dead. The Bundibugyo strain, a rare form of Ebola, different from the more commonly known Zaire strain, was first confirmed in Ituri province on May 14th, just 7 days ago. By May 16th, it had spread to Kinshasa, the capital. By May 19th, confirmed cases appeared in Uganda's capital, Kampala, and yesterday, Uganda banned handshakes and unnecessary physical contact nationwide. Now here's the thing that makes this crisis unlike every other crisis swirling around this tournament. The others, the ticket prices, the hotel bookings, the visa disputes, the transport costs, the Iran participation question, all of those are governance problems, commercial problems, political problems, the kind of problems that football organizations have learned over decades to navigate and eventually absorb. An Ebola outbreak in a host nation's home country 3 weeks before their first World Cup in 52 years is not a governance problem. It is a public health emergency that has already prompted the CDC to restrict travel from DR Congo to the United States. It has already forced the Congolese Football Federation to cancel their farewell event in Kinshasa, and it has placed FIFA in a position it has never occupied before, monitoring a declared global health emergency involving a qualified nation's home country while simultaneously trying to confirm that the team and its delegation can safely enter the host country's territory. So today, on May 21st, we're going to go through all of it, every angle, because the Ebola story is the newest and most urgent, but it's arriving on top of a foundation that was already cracked in ways that are now producing specific, documented financial consequences for the cities that were promised the greatest sporting windfall in American history. Let's start with what's happening with DR Congo right now. And let's be precise about it, because the details matter. The DR Congo national football team squad was announced this week. Sébastien Desabre, the French coach, is based outside Congo. The vast majority of the players are based in Europe, predominantly in France, where Congo's diaspora has produced a generation of footballers playing in Ligue 1 and Ligue 2. That's critical because the CDC travel restriction applies to non-US passport holders who have been in DR Congo, Uganda, or South Sudan in the previous 21 days. Most of the squad hasn't been in Kinshasa. Their preparation camp in Kinshasa was canceled, meaning the players who were there are leaving, in the words of team spokesman Jerry Kalemo, in the next hours. The preparation plan now looks like this: a farewell event in Kinshasa that won't happen, followed by friendlies against Denmark and Liège, Belgium on June 3rd, and against Chile in southern Spain on June 9th, followed by the team arriving in Houston from June 11th. The State Department has confirmed, through a senior official speaking to CNN, that they expect the team to be able to attend and participate. But the same official confirmed there will be no exemptions for fans. Read that again. A State Department official confirmed that the team will likely be fine and that the fans will not. Congo's fans, many of whom have been waiting 52 years for this moment, who watched their country beat Jamaica in a playoff to qualify, who had plans and dreams and possibly even bought tickets, cannot enter the United States. Not because of a political decision, not because of a visa policy, because there is a live Ebola outbreak in their country and the CDC has enacted a formal travel restriction order. This is the most painful kind of access failure, because it's nobody's fault in the way that a ticket pricing decision or a visa policy decision is someone's fault. The outbreak is a public health reality, the restriction is a public health response, and the people who pay the price are the football fans of a nation that qualified against the odds and deserves to be celebrated, not quarantined out of the story. FIFA's statement acknowledged it is monitoring the situation. It said it is working with the CDC, the State Department, and the WHO. The Houston World Cup host committee did not immediately return requests for comment.
There is one further dimension to this that deserves direct attention. Ebola, specifically the Bundibugyo strain, spreads through direct contact with the bodily fluids of infected people. It does not spread through casual contact. It is not airborne. The WHO's current assessment is that there is little risk the outbreak would rise to the level of a global pandemic. So the risk to fans and players who are not in Ituri province, Kinshasa, or Kampala is low, assessed honestly. But public perception and public health data don't always travel together. The word Ebola carries a weight that goes beyond epidemiology, and the fact that a World Cup is opening with a live WHO-declared public health emergency involving one of its participating nations, one whose fans can't legally enter the host country, is a story that will be in the background of every Congo-DR match, whether FIFA wants it there or not. Now let's step back from the Ebola crisis and look at the broader picture of what America's World Cup plan actually looks like on May 21, 2026. Because the Ebola story is the newest, but the financial story has been building since the beginning. And a report published this week laid out its consequences in terms specific enough to be undeniable. The 11 U.S. World Cup host cities are collectively facing a shortfall of at least $250 million. Not a projection, not a concern, a documented, reported, sourced figure, based on conversations with officials inside those host cities who are describing their situation in terms that go well beyond disappointment. Chicago saw this coming. Back in 2018, when U.S. Soccer was still assembling the bid, Chicago withdrew from the host city competition. Officials there said they were concerned about open-ended costs that FIFA's deal structure didn't adequately address. Minneapolis did the same. Glendale, Arizona did the same. At the time, their caution was noted and largely set aside by the cities that stayed in. The prize, a share of what FIFA promised would be more than $5 billion in short-term economic activity, seemed to justify whatever it cost to secure it. The former New Jersey governor epitomized the mood when he said there was no way to overestimate how big a bonanza the games could be for his state. The current New Jersey governor is fighting FIFA over $48 million in transportation costs that the organization has refused to contribute a cent toward. The gap between those two moments, the optimism of 2018 and the financial reality of 2026, is where the story lives. And The Independent published a report this week that described it with precision that the football world needs to sit with. Some cities are so desperate for commercial revenue that they are pitching local dry cleaners and mechanics for sponsorship. That is a direct quote from sources speaking to The Independent. Dry cleaners and mechanics for a tournament that FIFA's president described as the equivalent of 104 Super Bowls. The reason they're pitching dry cleaners is that FIFA's commercial contracts prevent host cities from doing deals with any company that might compete with FIFA's primary global sponsors. You can't do a deal with a local food chain if McDonald's is a FIFA partner. You can't do a deal with a local drinks company if Coca-Cola is already in the ecosystem. The commercial perimeter around the World Cup is so tightly controlled by FIFA that the local businesses which would normally be natural partners for a city hosting a major event are either locked up by FIFA's global network or excluded by the terms of the host city agreements. Sources speaking to The Independent described the overall arrangement with two words: the worst deal in FIFA World Cup history. That phrase didn't come from a disgruntled local politician. It came from people inside the host city ecosystem who have been working on this tournament for years. People who wanted it to work, people who believed the promise, and who are now, 3 weeks from kickoff, describing the contract they signed as the worst in the tournament's history. To understand how this happened, you have to go back to the host city agreements themselves. These are the contracts each city signed directly with FIFA to secure its hosting rights. They include obligations to provide stadiums, infrastructure, security perimeters, transport access, public spaces for fan festivals, volunteer networks, translation services, and dozens of other operational requirements. They also include something that the cities perhaps didn't scrutinize as carefully as they should have: the revenue allocation. FIFA retains virtually all of the $11 to $14 billion this tournament is expected to generate. Ticket revenue flows to FIFA. Hospitality packages flow to FIFA. Broadcast revenue flows to FIFA. Sponsorship revenue flows to FIFA. Cities and states get to host the event, get the exposure, and receive indirect economic benefits, spending by visiting fans at local hotels, restaurants, and businesses, but they get none of the direct commercial revenue. And they bear the costs: the security costs, the transport infrastructure costs, the staffing costs for the public spaces around the venues, the marketing and promotion costs for the fan festivals. All of it comes from public budgets, state funding, and whatever private sponsorship the cities can secure within the FIFA's highly restricted commercial framework. In New Jersey, host of the final, the governor publicly confirmed that FIFA provides $0 toward transportation costs for the tournament, while expecting New Jersey Transit to safely move 40,000 fans to and from MetLife Stadium for every match. The bill? $48 million. After weeks of public dispute, a partial reduction was negotiated, not through FIFA paying anything, but through the governor finding private sponsors to bridge part of the gap. The round-trip train fare for fans arriving from Manhattan dropped from $150 to $105. $105 for a 15-minute train journey to the World Cup final. The FanFest situation has deteriorated even further. New Jersey's planned tournament-long FanFest at Liberty State Park, which would have been one of the largest public viewing spaces in North American sporting history, was canceled entirely. The governor's office announced it had instead allocated $5 million for smaller, more localized events. Fans who had already bought tickets for the Liberty State Park event received refunds and no equivalent alternative. New Jersey is not alone. Two other American host cities have scaled back their fan plaza plans entirely. 3 more are reportedly facing funding challenges that may force them to revise their events significantly. The free, open, public experience of a World Cup, the part that belongs to the fans who can't afford stadium tickets, is being cut back city by city because the costs of delivering it weren't covered by the deal those cities signed. Here's where things get interesting in a way that football media hasn't fully captured. The people describing this as the worst deal in FIFA World Cup history aren't saying FIFA behaved illegally. They're saying the deal was structured in a way that extracted maximum value from the host relationship while returning minimum obligation to the hosts. That the promise of $30 billion in economic activity was based on assumptions about international visitor volumes that haven't materialized. That the commercial restrictions FIFA placed on host cities made it impossible for them to offset their costs through local partnerships. And that the result, 3 weeks from kickoff, is a collective shortfall of at least $250 million across the 11 cities that were supposed to be the engine of the most lucrative tournament in football history. The City Journal published the piece this week with a title that would have seemed unthinkable 2 years ago. It asked whether U.S. cities would come to regret hosting the World Cup. That question is being asked seriously, not by critics of the sport, by analysts and officials who spent years trying to make the plan work. Now let's look at one more layer, because alongside the Ebola crisis and the financial collapse, there's a story that emerged yesterday, May 20th, that adds another dimension to the tournament's difficulties. A letter was sent to FIFA yesterday, not from a fan group, not from a government, from players. Dozens of professional footballers signed an open letter coordinated through the New Weather Institute, calling on FIFA to take stronger action on heat protocols during the tournament and to reduce the carbon footprint of a competition that requires teams and fans to travel extensively between host cities separated by thousands of kilometers. The heat protocol request followed FIFA's December announcement that all matches at the 2026 World Cup would include a mandatory 3-minute hydration break in each half, the first time the rules of football have been formally altered to accommodate environmental conditions at a major tournament. Queen's University Belfast had warned FIFA in January 2025 that wet bulb globe temperature readings at several American host cities were higher than Qatar's temperatures during the winter months when the 2022 World Cup was played. During last summer's Club World Cup in the United States, temperatures at some matches reached 102 degrees Fahrenheit. Weather delays occurred. Players showed visible signs of heat stress. The mandatory break rule was welcomed by some and criticized by others. USMNT coach Mauricio Pochettino, who tested the format in an Atlanta pre-tournament friendly in March, was direct about his view. "I don't like it," he said, pointing to the disruption to rhythm and momentum. Fans inside the stadium booed when the break was called, and when FIFA's chief tournament officer first announced a change, he did so in a meeting with broadcasters, noting that the breaks would create natural commercial windows for advertising. That context matters. A rule change introduced to protect players' health was first announced in a meeting with television executives as an advertising opportunity. Yesterday's player letter asked FIFA to go further, to strengthen the heat protocols, to reduce the carbon footprint of a tournament that, in the 48-team format, requires exponentially more flights between host cities than previous editions. The letter didn't make demands, it made requests, but it was signed by dozens of professional footballers. It was published the day before this script was recorded, and it represents something new. Players, not just fans and officials and consumer groups, publicly asking questions about whether this tournament was designed with their welfare and the planet's welfare adequately in mind. There is also this week a story that the Mirror reported and that deserves mention. A FIFA referee has been removed from the tournament following what was described as grim allegations. The specifics of those allegations are not confirmed in enough detail for this script to report them, but the removal itself is documented. A referee removed from a World Cup weeks before kickoff, added to everything else.
Let's look at the bigger picture of what all of this means together. America's World Cup plan, as it was sold to the world and to its own host cities in 2018, was built on several interlocking promises: the economic windfall, the accessibility of tickets, the welcome extended to the global football community, the logistical efficiency of using existing world-class stadiums in the world's most developed sports market. 3 weeks out, the score on those promises looks like this. The economic windfall: host cities are collectively short at least $250 million, pitching local dry cleaners for sponsorship and canceling the fan fest they promised their communities, the number being described privately by insiders as the worst deal in World Cup history. The accessibility of tickets: resale prices have fallen 24% in a month, meaning early buyers overpaid significantly for non-refundable tickets. The cheapest final ticket is over $4,000. Football Supporters Europe and Euro consumers have filed a formal legal complaint with the European Commission, alleging monopoly abuse. 2 members of Congress have written to FIFA about deceptive practices. The welcome extended to the global community: fans from 4 qualified nations, Haiti, Iran, Congo DR, and Ivory Coast, face travel restrictions preventing them from attending. Congo's fans were cleared to come until an Ebola outbreak in their country prompted a CDC order that arrived 3 weeks before their team's first match. Iran's participation itself remains in live crisis talks. A UN-affiliated official canceled his tickets over fear of detention. Thousands of Congolese diaspora fans in the United States who had tickets and travel plans are now waiting to understand whether their families back home can join them, knowing the answer is almost certainly no. The logistical efficiency: host cities spent hundreds of millions of dollars on infrastructure that FIFA's contract obligates them to deliver without return on the commercial revenue that infrastructure generates. Fan fests are being canceled. Transport costs are being absorbed by state budgets. Security is being funded by a federal grant that arrived months late and had to be confirmed under press inquiry. None of this means the football won't be extraordinary. The football will almost certainly be extraordinary. Argentina defending, Messi's final tournament, Ronaldo's final tournament, Spain with Lamine Yamal, France with Mbappe 1 goal from the all-time scoring record. England still waiting 60 years. Brazil under Ancelotti. The matches, 104 of them across 3 countries from June 11th to July 19th, will produce stories that none of us will forget. But the plan that was supposed to surround those stories, the infrastructure, the welcome, the economics, the accessibility, that plan is falling apart in documented, specific, financially quantifiable ways that are going to matter long after the final whistle at MetLife Stadium. The 2026 World Cup was supposed to be proof that football could do this bigger and better than ever before. 3 weeks out, it's producing evidence of something different. That bigger doesn't automatically mean better. That scale without adequate planning creates problems that the beauty of the game can't always fix. And that the cities, communities, fans, and players who were told they were getting the greatest sporting event in human history deserve an honest accounting of what they actually got. So, here's what I want to ask you today. With everything we've talked about, the Ebola crisis hitting DR Congo's fans, the $250 million shortfall across host cities, the fanfests being canceled, the players writing to FIFA about heat, the referee removed, the ticket complaints filed with the European Commission, do you think the football itself is enough? Can the matches override the mess? And here's the one I really want your answer on. When this tournament is over on July 19th and FIFA releases its final revenue figures, somewhere between $11 and $14 billion, do you think the host cities, the fans, the workers, and the communities who made it possible will feel that the deal they got was worth it? Leave it in the comments. Every answer matters. Hit the like button if this gave you the full picture that other channels aren't providing. Subscribe if you're not already here. We're on this story every single day, all the way to the final.